So, you know, somebody told me they hoped I'd make more videos. Honestly, the whole abortion, struggle that is going on, and the, abortion movement. I did want to take credit for the fact that I have given money to Zane's due process, and side more with the idea that I also bought access to that wonderful documentary by Rebecca Gomper. It's called Vessel, about the woman that made the ship out at sea to help women bypass countries in which this procedure was considered illegal. And I am far more inspired by radical pro-choicers than moderate ones, to say the least. I think what they do is damn fucking heroic. The problem, is that, and that it's been so beautifully explained to me, in essence, is that abortion is a medically necessary procedure. Nobody could really force me to say that either. Nobody really put me in a position where I had to say, that concept. I accept responsibility for it. The thing is ultimately that many pregnancies, they still even to this modern day, end in the death of the pregnant woman and the birth of the child. I mean, there are pregnancies that do this, that will literally kill the woman that's carrying the child. And are we supposed to basically say that abortion's legal even in that sort of circumstances? Are we supposed to go down that road? Because that's basically what's happening. They're basically saying, let's save all the children, even if it ultimately kills their mother in the process of saving the damn child. I mean, and now that I'm 35 years of age and I've been in this country for a while and I've seen how its politics actually operates, I do appreciate at this point that neoliberalism is the norm. And when you want me to describe what neoliberalism is, and if you don't believe I actually know what the idea is, it's basically the market's always right. The market always knows best. The market never makes mistakes, even though it's obvious as day to anybody that actually trades on the market, that the market engages in all kinds of irrationality, even though it can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. That is also true. Just because the market's crazy doesn't mean it's going to turn around on time for you to really capitalize on that insanity. That's the other corollary, to that realization. The market doesn't always do the most rational thing. That's the thing. I mean, if you really start looking for it, you can start noticing inconsistent patterns. Like, you'll realize that solar, for instance, doesn't really ultimately compete with oil. Solar provides like it provides power to stationary facilities, but when the oil price goes down, what happens to solar? It goes down as well. This doesn't it doesn't really make sense, and yet this is how people trade. I mean, if there's a problem in one energy sector, it often spreads to the other, and this is madness. It won't last. It'll turn around ultimately when people realize that just because oil is doing bad doesn't mean that fewer solar panels are going to sell. It's not a reality. And yet that's exactly what the market does. And this is not a rationally based perspective. It's not a rational thing to do, but the market does it on a constant basis. There's no good reason for this behavior to continue or for it to exist, but it will. you know and obviously, as somebody that sees these things, you can complain about them or you can attempt to capitalize on them. But that is in essence what neoliberalism is. The market always knows best. It's the religion of capitalism. It's capitalism turned into a religion, and rugged individualism. And my I think most sincere complaint about American society is just America doesn't really understand or really deeply appreciate the concept of moderation, even though it might say that it does. It might say that it doesn't want to vote for political extremists, but it still doesn't really appreciate the fact that most of America's truest and most sincere ideals have been hijacked. I mean, rugged individualism and the idea of self reliance. Like, is there anything that's truly awful or immoral about the concept of self reliance? Uh, you know, in the grand scheme of things, I would love to be more self reliant myself. I wouldn't like to have to rely on other people, and I'm doing everything I can to push in that direction myself. It's an achievement that I'm trying to work towards. I feel it sucks. I don't want to be in a position where I'm dependent on other people anymore. I don't want to be stuck in that boat. It's not a pleasant place to be, because then you have to rely on other people to actually enable your goals and to help you with certain things. And I just don't like being stuck in that position. And I wouldn't want to encourage anybody else to be stuck in that position either. It's not a place that you'd really like to be. But the thing is that at the end of the day, a good idea and a good concept can be taken and stretched to such an extreme that that idea starts to become toxic. And I think that is the biggest problem with American society. It doesn't, it may pay lip service to moderation, but actually living it and walking the path of moderation is not something that it really knows how to do or will do on its own. Because if it really did, it would also realize that it should take its ideals in moderation as well. you know, and that's the problem with American society in the most crystallized way that I can express the sentiment, and how I connect it to the abortion issue. Well, what did you expect was going to happen? I mean, of course, we're blaming women for getting pregnant in the first place. This is the virus. This is the virus that's at the heart of our culture. The individualism that has been taken into and run amok into hyper individualism. It's the incapacity to take individualism, which is a good thing, and do it in moderation instead of taking it to such extremes that we start blaming individuals for every single one of their failures, instead of recognizing that there are many things beyond our individual controls. Like, no one chose to be born or to be here, for instance. Like, reality and existing is something that was kind of ultimately thrust on us, and there's quite a bit of suffering in the world that, if we were able to minimize or get rid of, we would almost instantaneously. I think most of you would agree with me on that. Some of that suffering is just not able to be alleviated. It's an unfortunate aspect of the world we live in, yet it's beyond anybody's individual control. Pain is a reality in the world. It's a limitation that we're subjected to. We can't go get around it in a lot of cases. Hunger. You have to eat. You have to eat. You have to drink. You have to have shelter, and we have basic needs that we're not able to just basically escape from, and shove off. We don't really have power over that reality. We are, I guess you could say, as individuals, we have more power than we often want to give ourselves credit for. But by the same token, America often wants to pretend that individuals are superheroes, and that we're capable of the Iron Man world of being Clark Kent. When in reality we're far more limited than Clark Kent ever was, and will always be far more limited than Clark Kent ever was. I mean, this incapacity to accept American and an individual's limitations, and to stop essentially trying to ascribe blame to an individual for having limits, and for having an upper limit that they just can't basically perform in excess of. The unwillingness to do that, and to pin everything, and to tell everybody that their lack of success that they're experiencing in their life is ultimately their responsibility, and it's all on them, and it's all their fault. And of course that ultimately eventually translates into blaming women for getting pregnant in the first place, and trying to ban abortions, because we want on a very deep level to blame the individual for their own personal failures. So I mean, what did you expect? You're not going to live in a culture that basically embraces, rugged individualism without falling into the depths of misogyny. Like these two forces can't coexist. They will one will necessarily lead to the other. So if you if women ultimately would like to see the death of, this tendency, and they would like us to stop basically blaming them and to stop putting, the pressure on them for getting pregnant in the first place, what I would say is maybe stop blaming individuals for failing to succeed in the world. Start help, basically tear down the cult of individual responsibility, because it is a cult. Many people are just, completely blinded and unable to think outside that box. You don't have to be one of them.